DJ Sixsmith. I'm here with CNBC's Carl Quintanilla. Cities of Success, Nashville, December 6th on CNBC. Carl, how are you?
It's great to have you in the building.
It's great to be here. So you went down to Nashville. Everybody knows about the rich music history, but so much more to this city. Tech, sports, luxury. Why was Nashville a great place to start off?
Well, our thinking was, all right, let's take a look at American cities that are reinventing themselves, drawing in jobs, drawing in capital, and trying to avoid the pitfalls of growth, right? Make sure you have enough housing, make sure you have enough public transit, make sure you have enough utilities. And lots of cities have had that story told already. Austin's a great example, Jacksonville, Salt Lake. But there's a huge new generation of cities that have done this work and have been working on it for years. In Nashville's case, decades. And it's just now starting to catch fire. And so our hope was, first off, it's a visual city. It's known as the music city. It's got great culture, and it's an icon almost in terms of the arts, but the story is so much more well-rounded than that. It just seemed like a natural place to start.
So people will get to see Garth Brooks in here. You did a few big interviews, a couple of former Tennessee governors, Seth Bernstein from AllianceBernstein. How do you prepare for big interviews?
Read everything you can, watch everything you can, but once you're in, try to put all that aside and just listen. Listen to what they're telling you, and they do have a good story to tell. I mean, Garth sort of brings the history of the city and why it's been so important musically and what that's given to the economy. But the governors, I was blown away at how sort of prescient they were, thinking way ahead. Like, they built their stadium, their initial sports arena, before they had any professional sports. And that's really going out on a limb. Their thinking at the time was, well, this will be a great new music venue, and any sports we get will be gravy. Now they have NFL. Now they have Major League Soccer. Now they have hockey. They're talked about as a favorite for MLB expansion one day. So all of these planning strategies they had finally came to fruition, and now they can sort of sit back and say, yeah, we told you so. But a lot of hard work happened between, obviously, then and now.
So that's really interesting. They built the stadiums. They didn't have the teams. You go back to the 90s, they had no pro sports teams. So how do you think they ultimately got it done? And do you think this baseball thing can really happen?
The MLB thing, they're normally at the top of lists of favorite cities that would expand. I think they're hopeful. There's a huge host committee in the city that's in charge of bringing people in, introducing them to what's different about Nashville. So I think one day it probably will happen. But they just had optimism. They knew they had a flow of momentum in terms of money. Healthcare was already a huge business. Healthcare actually does a multiple of what music does for the city economically. So you had venture capital investing, $2 billion in healthcare companies, tons of jobs, medical schools. So I think they had two big burners firing, and they're like, we can get 5 if we bring in real estate and financials and now tech, really, with Amazon and Oracle moving in a big way. So now they got a full stove of pots that are boiling. And I just think it was a mix of optimism and maybe trying their hand at some luck, hoping for a break. And that's where COVID came in.
Let's talk about healthcare, because that is the biggest industry in Nashville. You mentioned the venture capital money. How did that change the game, and how does that potentially change the identity of Nashville when you think about a big picture?
I think if you think of a city and you're like, all right, how are we going to get new companies to move in? Those companies need to be able to hire locally, because not everybody's going to transfer from New York or LA or whatever. So, all right, how do you build a city full of great job candidates? Healthcare is a pretty good way. You're talking about well-educated people, pretty youthful, people who are willing to work hard, but also looking for lifestyle. And that kind of changed the demographics of the city, and that pays off later when you're pitching in AllianceBernstein or a bank or Amazon, and you're like, all right, you want to put your hub here, and only a quarter of your employees are going to move with you. You're going to be able to find people with great resumes who enjoy living here and are going to be productive workers. And that's hard to do in 5 years, much less a couple of years. But when COVID hit and people realized you could work from anywhere, and they did move, it just changed the pool of labor. And that made it a lot easier for the big companies to take a gamble on relocating.
Those big companies right now, you have Amazon, Nissan, Meta, Oracle, the list goes on and on. Why is Nashville so popular for these companies at the moment?
A bunch of reasons. Lifestyle is one, cost of living is one, but it's also kind of like geographic location. All right, so AllianceBernstein's a financial, right? They've got a trading desk, but it's kind of hard to have traders working on New York time,
Right.
when you are, I mean, it does get done, obviously. LA firms make it work, but you're only an hour removed from the New York Open. So that kind of makes it a little more easy for the workflow. Geographically, it's not an accident that FedEx is in Memphis and UPS is in Louisville. You're kind of, centered. There are, obviously, you're closer to the East Coast than the West Coast, but you're not that far away from anything. You're only 3 hours from, I think, from Atlanta,
Right. Yeah.
and Chicago. I mean, it's a kind of a thing that would be hard for another city to replicate. Others are trying, but I would argue Nashville had a pretty good hand going into this reinvention. Geographics, demographics, that's all you need, really.
Then there's Partnership 2030, which is a new initiative, bring more business, bring more industry. Yet at the same time, there's a lot of building that goes on. So how do they hold those two things where it doesn't overwhelm the city, but it also helps the city grow immensely?
Part of it is cutting deals with companies that move in. Amazon's bringing 5,000 employees, but as part of that deal and as part of the whole tax incentive structure, they had to promise to do some funding for new housing, so that those new entrants, the market doesn't explode, which we've seen examples of that in other cities where tons of people moved in, housing prices went to the moon, and nobody could afford to live there or couldn't afford to move there. So that takes some of the edge off. Nashville's had a lot of success already. I think they still have aspirations of doing even more. They would love to have a Super Bowl. They would love to have F1. They'd love to have all of these other events that sort of are marquee for sports is a big thing. They've already got a pretty good share of music. But I think that they are still looking for the country to think of them differently, as not just a one-trick pony or a two-trick pony, that they are in a different league of cities. I think that they're still working on that part.
Carl, lastly, you had some great experiences in Nashville. What were some of your favorite for this whole project here?
Well, my favorite has nothing to do with work at all. I mean, I took my kids to see the Stones at the stadium pre-COVID, which was an amazing experience for them. But part of that was getting the food, right, and staying at the hotels, and going to the Ryman Auditorium, and going to the Country Music Hall of Fame. I mean, if you like music,
there's no better place.
Yeah, it's kind of like going to church in a lot of ways. But I think that's what's kind of cool about it, is that it already had such a gem in its sort of ecosystem, and it's sort of just built around that. Now when I go back, like I've gone several times for this doc, and every time there's a new crane, there's a new construction site. I forget, they've added 90 hotels.
Wow.
In 90 hotels.
That's unbelievable.
In 10 years. And a lot of them are very high end. The Four Seasons is, the room rates there go up to 10 grand a night. I mean, incredible. So I think it's just exciting to see capital moving, and you sort of ferret out the reasons why that's happening. But with all of that, it's actually, the story sort of tells itself, and we just have to follow their lead.
It's a fascinating business story. Cities of Success Nashville, December 6th on CNBC. Carl, thanks for the time.
Thanks.